3PNR with Adam R.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tony Sivalelli, and I'm going to be your host today on 3PNR. And our special guest is going to be none other than Mr. Adam Rodriguez, the show's normal host. And we wanted to treat you, the listeners, to know a little bit more about Adam. Adam, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well, Tony, and thank you for this this very different podcast for me. So we're gonna play it by ear.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me help out here as I was, nudging you the couple times you've had me on your show, which I've really enjoyed. But I think your listeners would totally appreciate a show dedicated to you and about you and how you came to be the host that you are. And I respect all that you've done with the paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, psychic phenomena, law enforcement, and everything else that you've treated your listeners to. So I'd like to ask you to start out, Adam, go over a little bit of your history for your listeners.
Well, real simple for me. As a child, so what started the fascination with ufology and the paranormal and the afterlife, I was a kid. And I would have night terrors. It's where you're a kid, you see something in the room, you panic, you run to your parents' room, that whole shebang.
Right.
And it wasn't until I sat down and stared back when I realized, I'm a kid doing this. I was a strange kid, right? I wanted to know what this is I was seeing. And I would stare back and realize it was my eyes adjusting to the light, right? So that started it for me, though, because that curiosity took effect on me.
Right.
Yeah, and then so later on, not too much later, my grandfather passes, and my mom and my dad expressed to me that, he's gone, he's in heaven now. And as a kid, I grew up in a Catholic background, and they explain what heaven is, and you're not supposed to question it. That's it. This is what it is, and shut up.
Understood some of that. Same here.
Yeah, so I wanted to know what was heaven. Where is this heaven they speak of, right? Because at the time I lived in Brooklyn, so you could, and I think my apartment building was about 8 stories tall. So on the roof, I would, as a kid with my friends, I'd be like, I wonder if I could see heaven from here. Because they would always just,
there you go.
And so that started there.
Well, space is often called the heavens, so.
Right. And then to add to that, that somewhere in that time frame, Whitley Strieber puts his book out, Communion. I've never, outside of E.T., the movie, I didn't even know what aliens were. And, I see the book cover, travel around. I point at it. I show my father. I'm like, what's that? So my mom, she read, I guess they read the book and they kind of told me something about it, but these are Catholics. So how much
they actually bought the book and read it, huh?
Well, I not my mom. My aunt had it. My mom was curious.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. My aunt was more the person that was going to try to find out these things, not her. So long story short, I had a lot of questions about this and I asked my parents, and it was always like, they would they would push it in the perspective of, it's false, it's fake, it's made up. If aliens are real, we'd know about it. And that wasn't good enough for me as a kid. I had to know more, And so there's a movie that came out with Christopher Walken called Communion about Whitley Strieber.
I remember it.
And my mom watched it in agreement. We all watched this movie late night, and my dog at the time, Ginger, jumps on the couch and scares the shit out of us. Right. So that little bit of fright let me know that I'm as a kid, in hindsight anyway, not then, but now I realize I was in. I wanted to know more.
Right.
And then your teens come around and that your interest in those things are still there, but they're not at the front of your interest, right? You're out doing other things.
I understand that. It's like in the back of your mind always, but it's not what you're doing actively with, you're communing with your friends and et cetera every day.
Right. And so the only other thing I could speak to is I told the story many times. Well, when I was a kid in Florida, we moved to Florida, we would sneak out at night and play manhunt, midnight, 1 a.m. And a bunch of friends of mine, and if you could picture in your mind, there's this enormous lake and there's some woods in the background. It's in Florida. And they say they saw shadow figures. And so naturally, my instincts run to it. I got to see this. So I ran all the way over there. And to my disappointment, there was nothing. until that really, reality sets in. Like I'm in Florida, there's gators, there's
So this
snakes.
is when you moved from New York to Florida, then
Yeah.
you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
We came here for a quote unquote better life.
How old were you when you got down south?
10. I was 10 years old when I
Okay.
got here.
Okay, back to the woods.
Yeah. So anyway, then nothing there. I'm bothered by this. So play manhunt with friends, go home. And, when I was a kid, there wasn't YouTube or the internet. So
Of course, right.
the next day, I go to the library in my school and found a book called the Paranormal and the Unexplained. And I read this book, and it's filled with hypotheticals. And as a kid, you notice when you're a kid, you expect the information to be so wonderfully detailed, and there's going to be some information that's going to enlighten you, and then to your disappointment, it's speculation, right?
Right. You don't have the exactness of what you're looking for the answers.
Right. So for me, through my adolescence, the subject died off. It wasn't till probably 2017, because again, ufology, the paranormal, these shows come out, and in the beginning I was kind of into them, and as you're watching these shows, there's a reality. I now recognize that they're doing things for entertainment purposes, and that's this. So I'm done. I'm done at this point. And I even had a friend, this kid Kevin, around this time. He's like, "There's this field over here. I'm speaking Florida, and it's near this Seminole Indian reservation, and they're saying you could see spirits there at night." So I would go there and wait. I never got to see anything. I've heard so many people say they've seen things, and so nothing for me. I went to a friend's house, same thing. They lived in a house that was supposedly haunted. I go there. I stayed at night. I have beers at the guys. I'm up all night. Nothing. So I came to the conclusion it's me, right? Maybe I lack the software to observe these things.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so
maybe it's a timing thing.
It could be, or it just could be like a lot of these psychics. I really think that everyone's brain is pretty similar. Minus that, as hardware goes anyway. But as far as software and people utilizing parts of their brain to, maybe have a perception and stuff, I think other people do have, the software download.
I think we all have it innately. And I think you're right. It's just a matter of some people, they don't have to exercise it as much. They don't have to work with it as much. And it just comes a little bit more, if you could say, naturally. But I think it's all there for everybody. And I think you knowing that has always fueled you.
Yeah. And so I end up doing studies because it's a big thing for me, death, right? So as a kid, to kind of rewind to my grandfather's passing, and then later on my grandmother, that there's a fear of death, right? There's a question of mortality. You're not going to see these people anymore. And so part of you, you've grown up in this organized religious belief that, there's an afterlife. You grow up in Catholic, man. You do something wrong, oh, God, forgive me for this,
Right.
And I was guilty of this, especially my adolescence. God, constantly, like pre-forgiveness, right? Like, I'm going to do this, but please.
So you were a little hard on yourself, you're saying.
I was one of those. And that's because of organized religion, though.
Of course. It was imprinted in you.
Yeah. It wasn't,
your upbringing.
It wasn't until I started reading studies about, what doctors have discussed about death. And that's what gave me this kind of, the computer turns off, it's over. That's all there is, right? Game over.
Unless it's downloaded somewhere else.
Right.
Go on.
Yeah. So I realized that people, when they're seeing their life, and I'm not saying this for everyone, I'm just saying this is what I read then. This is my train of thought at that time.
Of course.
I started realizing, or at that time, realizing the idea that when we're dying, our brain is utilizing chemicals to kind of soften the blow of what's going on, right? That's why you're seeing like these happy memories, these pleasant people in your life, for your loved ones. You're having a chemical response to death. And at that time, I started believing, well, maybe near-death people, because their brain is releasing, DMT and other chemicals
right.
So that's what they're seeing. It's these chemical reactions that they're having. Where it gets a little hairy is where I read some of the studies of these near-death people, and they're speaking about real-time events as if they're there in detail, great detail, things they couldn't possibly know. And that's what caught my interest. So, and then, the kids that have near-perfect memories, and this is before the internet. There's a little boy. I think he was in Rhode Island. I think so. where he was recalling being a pilot in World War II.
Right. We had mentioned that before.
Yeah.
Go on. That's interesting.
Yeah. And this wasn't like a world famous ace pilot that was well known. It was just some random pilot that was just, he was noted as dead. But this kid, in detail, the guy's name, where he crashed, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So as I start, and this is when I start preparing for the podcast when I'm doing this kind of work, is to read.
And by the way, there are similar stories to that. And some of these near-death experiences, just to interject real quick, because I looked into Raymond Moody there. Some of the ones that they looked at, they had, happened in a hospital, and one would come back and say, you know what, there's a tennis shoe on the rail outside of this window. And lo and behold, so said, there it was.
Right. Yeah. And so to put me back on track with the paranormal and ufology and the things that science would call anomalies, other people would call, mystery. 2017, when those videos were leaked for the UFOs from the government, I'm sold because now you can't deny the existence of these things. It's undeniable.
They're definitely UFOs for sure.
Right. And so the question is going to remain, what's behind the controls? All right. I mean, I have, when I talk in this show, and my friends ask me this too, some of my family, like, where do you come to these conclusions? It's like hypotheses, it's theories, ideas.
Like the books you read earlier that piqued your curiosity, but there's no definitive, as we can understand yet. But then again, innately, we know there's, others, and we know there's black budget military back engineered things. There's a lot of things, in my opinion, behind it. We've talked about that, but go on. Yeah.
Yeah. And that being said, in particular for me was, again, UFOs are real. No question about that. And so I see those videos. I'm like, well, now it made me wonder about the paranormal. Unfortunately, a lot of these TV shows, and I don't blame them. I get it. You want to make, what ends up happening in my mind is these people get on there, they find people like them, they make money, they start to alter their findings. And I get it. It's a business. But
You're correct there. Yeah.
Yeah. So it made me think some of that's got to be real now. Right. And so I started diving in deeper. I not so much. I played pool. I didn't really have, like, before COVID, I was never home. I was playing pool. I was on the go. I didn't watch TV. There's, how many TV shows I never seen? People are like, you never seen this? I'm like, I was never around.
Yeah. When you say play pool, we talked about this briefly. Give your audience a little bit more of that background, if you would.
Sure. I've always liked billiards. I played my pool most of my life. In 2006, I got more heavily involved with it. A friend of mine owned a pool hall. And then I'm a competitive person at nature, right? So I started practicing every day. Pool's one of those things. Some people are naturally good at it, but whether you're natural or unnatural, for every game you win, it requires hours of practice. The same fundamentals, you hit the same shot a billion times. And people look at this and like, oh, that's got to be boring. Well, I mean, if you want to get good, you got to be able to have memory muscle to hit every shot, and it requires hitting the same shot a billion times. So for years, that's what I would do.
Yeah. And there's some mathematics and things like that involved with that as well, as far as angles and energies and strength to put behind it, etc.
Yeah, it's 90% of billiards is cognitive, right? You got to think. It's a cerebral game. So the rest of the physical stuff is just fundamentals, and you have to be in good shape too. You're going to be on your feet for hours. A lot of people fail to understand that.
So I understand you played pool in a lot of different places.
Yeah, I traveled around a lot. I moved wherever. Like now, that's another thing. I never, even local, playing different pool halls. I never played at the same pool hall, the same table every day. You needed to change daily. So this way you could. That's like, because if you come, comfortable on one table, then what's going to happen is you go to another pool hall, you play in a tournament, you're not going to play so well. And the psychology you have is like, well, it's my table, it rolls different. So you have to travel a bit, get around. And we traveled tournaments for a long time. We drive to different tournaments. I've gone to Vegas for teams, for nationals.
Right. Wow. You definitely have a history with that. I mean, I never really thought about it. Like you just said, each pool table location, it's almost like a baseball field or a hockey rink. They all have their little, quirks and things that you have to adjust to. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Like, so you ever walk into a pool hall and some guy's like, hey, you want to play some, a little bit of money? Let's go to table 12. Why table 12? It's because he plays on it day and night. He knows how it rolls.
There you go.
So, But yeah, so for a long period of time, that's, shot pool, drink alcohol, hung out with friends, and then, the 2017 thing comes around. And so up until when COVID happened, that's it. You're indoors, right? You're locked down. We're in that state of we're frightened because there's potentially something out there you could breathe in, or, however they were depicting at that time. And so you're indoors. So what do you do when you're indoors? Well, your screen time, TV, phone, tablet, computer. And so I said, I'm going to look more into these videos and find out if anyone's trying to debunk them. And, I found some. I forget the guy's name. Mike something. But he tried saying it was another plane, like another fighter jet. I'm like, what is this guy crazy? One, you're insulting these pilots by saying that. They are trained observers, right? Their job's to identify and either eliminate or at least identify at the very minimum, right? They know another jet when they see one. So,
any risks or threats or anything like that, not that these were or weren't, but still they are trained observers.
Right. And they're flying around in 20 to 40 to $50 million investments for the government.
Right.
You're not going to put some guy in there who's just flying, he's
no,
a conspirator.
You're not going to be aboard the Nimitz or some of the other crafts if you're just happenstance with the one of the military outlets.
Right. So down the rabbit hole I go for the beginning of COVID. I'm watching a lot of podcasts, because I'm going to be honest. Prior to Joe Rogan, I didn't even know what a podcast really was. I had only ever heard of it a little bit, but keep in mind, I was never home. I pool and music and drinks. And so I watched an episode that was with Joe Rogan and Bob Lazar. And I remember what made me want to do a podcast, because there was questions I wanted to ask. I wish he would have asked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they focus so much on Bob's experience rather than hear him speak theory on what he thinks. I mean, they're talking about a physicist, a brilliant man who's encountered this. What are his thoughts? And I wanted to ask that. And that's what the first idea of my head podcast. I'll start my own. I'll meet people. I'm not doing this for fame. I promise. There's a bigger investment into this than there is a return so far. The point is, I get to make a network. I get to meet people like you and other people that are involved with ufology, and I get to educate myself. So rewind to post-mortem. I was concerned that, even at that point, really concerned that people are just having chemical responses with these near-death experiences. It wasn't until I spoke to Roberta Grimes on the show where I was a little enlightened, because when she was speaking about vibrations and frequencies, it made me realize that the human brain if you look at the construct of the brain, it's very much like a computer. And so you could definitely pick up different frequencies of your brain. If anyone ever puts doubt on being able to pick up a frequency or vibration, have a sinus infection and have someone play something at some hertz or tone in the distance and watch it affect you.
Right. Yeah, you talked about that with the Cynthia Martin, I think it was, and the Mozart and the sounds and things like that, how it can be uplifting. I've always felt that music can be inspiration. To me, inspiration always means in spirit, the type of play on words. But yeah, go on. Agreed.
Because that's true, because not to knock organized religion, I grew up around it, but you go to a church, and when you first get there, the music's upbeat. Everyone's really happy to see each other, right? And they're all embraced. Then you sit down, the money trays start to get launched, and it's the sad songs that come out. That lower tone to it, right? And at some point in your core, the obligation sets. I'm like, oh, wow, I sinned a lot this week.
Absolutely. That's the music for it. Absolutely.
That's right. So you're obligated now to pay that money. Like, I've been a real jerk this week, even though I was really happy to see my friends. And then the minute money's done, right back to the upbeat. So yeah, music has an amazing strength on people. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
So learning more about the afterlife, if I'm being honest, I'm not 1,000% certain. I don't think anyone is, of what there is thereafter. Speaking to Roberta Grimes gives me great comfort. Speaking to some of the paranormal people and their discoveries gives me some comfort.
And remember that insta idea that you brought up just earlier about the young boy and the reincarnation potentially of the fighter pilot, and other stories similar to that. So,
yeah. And I talked to my brother. My brother's a psychologist. He lives over in Oregon. And so he has his cure. He's science minded, right? He is one of those that will read every detail before forming an opinion. Where I form a lot of opinions and hope I'm wrong because, so someone can counter it, and then I learn something more. I mean, on this podcast alone, I've subtly have been disproven on things I thought, which challenged me to read more. Like people like Steve Murr. I love Steve Murr. That guy makes me think a lot.
That's good.
And so as I sit, I'm still a little uncertain about what is post life, and I don't want to be that person that says, yeah, it's real, or that person says, no, it's not, without going out into the world and doing some research. It's irresponsible. I can't form,
Right.
I tell you now, Tony, if I saw a ghost tomorrow, I'm cool.
Right.
Poltergeist, demon, wouldn't even matter to me. It just lets me know, hey, there's something more.
Right. Well, at least it's in a realm of a different frequency than the third dimension. We would definitely say that. I mean, there could be other realms that are dimensional that are just, again, it's like tuning in that radio dial like we talked about before. We are in what we call the third dimension. It vibrates from what to what, what frequency
Right.
to what frequency, but maybe there's something that's a little bit more subtle, that's a higher frequency. Then there's energy life forms there, or maybe part of our astral projection is there, or the etheric projection. So there's definitely the possibilities. I mean, energy is everywhere, and any wind and energy is composed. It comprises of everything, and time would be that as well.
Agreed. Which brings me to perception, and that's a strong point, because I've come to realize how we perceive things. Our brain doesn't. People have this thing; they think their brain's seeing something in real time. If you live in your house and you know your house well, your brain has memory banks. So this way the computer's not working so hard. As you walk around, it's just giving you the images as you would see it. But until something new happens, like a light just mysteriously turns on, or someone walks in the house, then your brain's giving you some feedback that's a little bit more real time. But even then, it's delayed.
And even then, what you see is based on what your eyeball can see, and there could be other things there that we're blind to.
Right. Exactly. When speaking to Steve Murr about frequencies and different, vibrations, and that's another thing too. There's parallels in what Steve's research is versus what Roberta Grimes has for afterlife experience, and versus what I hear other paranormal investigators and ufologists speak. And then here's a kicker. This same thing could be exampled with homicide detectives I'd spoken to. These people say they have these gut instincts, or they're just this knowing. But
right.
There's some sort of channel there that other people don't possess. Like, how is it that?
I think you're right, Adam. I mean, I was going to ask you one of the questions, your propensity for law, obviously, great respect, and same here. But there's also that, like you're just talking about right now, that they've been on a job long enough. They developed their own intuition, their gut feelings, etc.
Right. And you got a detective who stands next to another cop, and the other cop's like oblivious to what's going on. But the detective's like, I just know. And like I said, hit your brain. Like I firmly believe if you exercise your computer, your brain, you could actually form the ability to have a greater intuition.
Right. And that's why, as you know, I teach scientific remote viewing, and I've seen that happen with students of mine. But go on. Yes, I think you are totally correct there, Adam.
Yeah. Like even what you do, remote viewing, people look at it as like they put a stigma on it. Our government is experimental. The more I read about that, our government played with that long before that was some sort of stigma on TV.
Absolutely.
It's been thought about for quite a while. So for me, people ask me about, my thoughts on the aliens. Everything I speak about in theory and hypothesis on this podcast, I base it on what we would do. But how, in other words, if humanity is traveling interstellarly, we find another planet packed full of life forms, pretty sophisticated life forms too. They could speak, they could move. We would be very interested, right? And so, how would we go to? Because we can't breathe their air. The gas, it could be very similar to Earth, but the most slight difference in gas mixture for that atmosphere, we can't breathe. It's toxic.
Yeah.
So we
and
would
vice
have to.
Versa, it could be as well.
Right. So we would need, our programs. We get our scientists there. We need rovers. Although I would like to think if we're interstellar and we have that kind of technology, we have gotten to the point where we have bipedal representation of ourselves, where we could have an avatar state, right? We could upload our consciousness to that machinery, send it
Or,
down there.
or even a suit that could be put on us, and some of it, not as bulky as one might think,
Right.
and to have its own atmosphere that's conducive to our well-being.
Right. And so that's what gave me the gray theory, that they're an advanced biological robot. Everyone I'd spoken to, and I did a lot of off podcast interviews before the podcast started, because I really wanted to get an idea from witnesses what they're seeing and describing. And so far, pretty across the board, these grays come off as very cold, very observant. No, not one of them has mentioned facial features, and not even in some of the most popular cases, Whitley Strieber included. So you look at the eyes; they're very large on a small frame body. Now, if you're using a really strong material like carbon fibers or something probably more advanced, the framework itself doesn't really need to be bulky. It's strong enough to hold it up and move about. You don't need that many digits because they're only enough there to operate what it is they're doing. And then the eyes would just be multiple cameras, scanners.
Yes, exactly. I believe you're right with part of that deduction there, but they may be actually biological and robotic.
Sure, absolutely. I think the taller ones are the biological ones.
Right, and then they probably work under somebody else, no doubt.
Right. So that being said, I tricked if he ever listens, I'm sorry. He's a scientist, right? He's a robotics guy. He makes robots for competition purposes, and one day would hope to be working for, I think, NASA. That's his dream. So I asked him, like, hey, if you were going to send something to Mars to explore and do some archaeology, etc., how would you design this? So he, like, a week passed, he sent it back. He drew a bipedal robot with very large eyes that were really the camera. And it's similar, but not straight on, but it was damn near on it. And,
right.
And then I asked my nephew to do the same thing, and he came up with the same concept for a robot. So it lets you know that's, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Right? Nature made us the way nature made us the way we are because it works. It works well. So I don't know. That's what got me down that path. I've read so many different studies, so many different cases. And then
are there any particular cases like your guests that really were, like you said, Stephen Mira, that turned your thinking? Like you said, he makes you think a lot. What other guests have made you really ponder and to make you more hungry, so to speak, like you have been? Because you've got a lot of energy that you put into these shows, and it's like not only are you doing the shows, but you're feeding you're fueling your own fire, so to speak. Your passion. Yeah,
Ray Schmansky, he's one. He worked for He worked for in one of the air bases, right? He's compiled a lot of data. He's very passionate when he speaks. There's no nonsense. He's not, there's no nonsense to him. He just speaks to the point. Some of the ideas he has and some of the positions he takes gives me pause, makes me think. Other people that have gotten me really on point. Definitely Doug Wilson. Now, he is the lead investigator
out west, right?
Yeah, he's the lead investigator for the United States, actually. For he's head. So not only has he seen things or had the witnessed the craft he sees, but his approach to the entire thing, like the way he investigates, it has a strong system. To MUFON's credit, I've not met a person from MUFON yet that I had to ring the bell like, this guy's crazy. Or, this guy's, over the edge. The diversity is amazing, right? I mean, but Doug in particular, he's very chronological with everything he researches. And there's definitely a chain of custody when he gets involved in investigation, which I think is really important. I think if you're going to investigate, you should definitely have a chain of custody. There's been a lot of people that taken a lot of impact on me. I mean, you. I've spoken to you, and speaking to you, there's been many times, in the first 2 times we'd spoken, I would leave the podcast and I'd have more to think about. It would.
Well, I appreciate that. I always look at the bigger picture. I've had to actually get philosophical myself about all of this and the infinity loop and source playing itself out and dividing itself up into numerous incarnations of itself, but that's my thoughts on it. But let's get back to you. How about like the ghostly realm, or who's really inspired you or made you really think in that area?
Don and Laney from Spectre Waves, and then Dave Olson from Chicago Paranormal.
Okay.
Those guys, Don and Laney, they have their channel. Not like a lot of other channels where like there's this hour of like, what are we going to see next? They get right to business, right? And then you got David Olson, where he basically has the Ecto too, right? He has an ambulance converted to like a paranormal traveling station with I mean, when I say an investment in stuff for paranormal research,
reminds me of Ghostbusters.
I mean, it's out there, man. It's like, if you ever look at the episode I did in the first one, I put pictures of his stuff up there. It's amazing what he has.
I have to look at that.
So people like that, why does it confirm to me that there's definitely something more? You don't make those sort of investments with very minimal return unless you've encountered something.
Right.
Something had to have a profound effect on you to have you continue on that path.
Right. Well, I have a question.
Sure.
What about since obviously the paranormal goes through and it covers many areas. What about Bigfoot? Have you ever done somebody who did a show with the Bigfoot researchers or people who have the stronger sightings?
I'll be honest. I've reached out to a lot of people that they're quoted as experts in the field or whatever it is. No one has gotten back to me on that. Bigfoot's one of those things I'm having the hardest time subscribing to, because in the 2K, or actually the early 2010s, they were tracking down a chipmunk. I love documentaries and I love animal documentaries. They were tracking down a chipmunk. They were making sure this thing wasn't extinct. And with IR and drones and teams of people, they found this really small creature in a course of a year. So now you have a creature that's, way bigger, alleged.
So in other words, you're almost saying like a cryptozoological discovery.
Right.
Okay.
So do I think Bigfoot's fake? No, because who am I to say if it is or isn't? Again, it's irresponsible for me to form an opinion without going out in the field and doing the work. Even if I spoke to an expert, I still can't form an opinion because I'm not eligible to do so until I get out there and do some. That's one big thing with people that are naysayers. It is a comfortable thing to do is to say nay from your home. It's another thing to do to work. Disprove it the same way you're asking them to prove it. And so I don't know. I've heard a lot of theory on Bigfoot. When you start researching, especially when I talk to Steve Murr and I start reading about quantum physics, and you realize for these UFOs to be moving around the air, and you don't hear, they're silent for one. There's no, they're not breaking the sound barrier. So they're definitely using something that's like has to do with either frequency or vibration, that they're just moving through space.
Absolutely.
Effortlessly.
It's the energy. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it was J. Allen Hynek, close to his last days. I think he said something to the effect of, when we do discover the secret of UFOs, it's going to be one hell of a quantum leap. And I think, in my opinion, he meant quantum physics.
Yeah.
When we figure out and learn more about that, and then going into different dimensions, black holes, what is above, the macrocosm, black holes above. I think there's points here of entry and exit, even if it's as simple as protons, electrons, whatever, that we can enter and exit into other frequencies and or dimensions. I think it's it's the things like E8 and all these different things, the golden ratio, all these different things that go on that are exploring now, like at the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, Switzerland, et cetera, et cetera. There's just so much to quantum physics, and to begin to unravel that, we may have to evolve more consciously to even understand some of what we're actually getting into.
By far, by miles. We still view each other as independents. We don't see each other as a species yet. And to have a collective consciousness, which there's a lot of examples of that in life. To have a greater collective consciousness is going to require our species to stop seeing race, religion, politics, and, heavy, thin, like all these differences really, when you break us down to the cerebral, we're basically the same thing. We're energy inside of
we're of that same source. Couldn't agree with you more,
right.
Adam. I agree. I have a friend that's looking into things like that now, and No question about it. We label too much, and that all of a sudden puts a separation there. But we're kind of brought up that way. But I think we've made great progress in the last 20 years, 50 years, way more than what we looked at. Hey, what's that old scene in Men in Black? Tommy Lee Jones talking to Will Smith there. 1,500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was the center of the universe.
Right.
500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat. 15 minutes ago, you knew we were alone on this planet. Just think what you'll know tomorrow.
Exactly. I love that statement. It couldn't have been said better. That being said, a friend of mine, I have these conversations with friends. So did paranormal come first or did ufology come first? That's a good question, right? Because now think about this. Whatever they're utilizing for high energy to manipulate the space around them, are they opening portals unknowingly? Does Bigfoot exist because they did something to the atmosphere and to the realm, the energy around him that opened some portal that he was moving in and out of?
Absolutely. I definitely pondered that myself. I think that's, a great take on part of what Bigfoot could be.
Right. I mean, even think about paranormal. Like, what if you have ufology, according to what I read and what I'm coming to understand, they've been watching us since before writing. They've been around a long time. Now, they come here with the energy that they need to travel here and then to manipulate the space around them. Did they cause paranormal? Did they open doorways to the paranormal?
Maybe Adam, paranormal is just a play on words. Maybe what's paranormal to us is not paranormal to another race. I mean, we might be paranormal to chimpanzees and the things that we can do with technology.
Yeah.
Think about it. I mean, it's all relative, really, and it depends on where our level of consciousness and awareness lies.
I lose sleep at night thinking about stuff. I was watching the movie Poltergeist, right? And the kids communicating with something due to TV, and it like a brick hit me in the face. I'm hearing Steve Murrah in my head again talking about frequencies and how we would communicate across the vastness, different parallels. And then there's this little girl in this movie, and she's talking something through a TV,
right?
And the white noise. And if you think about what white noise is, it's a disturbed frequency. Right, a way to communicate. If you think about how the paranormal investigators are hearing the voices or using different frequencies to pick this up.
Yep. I remember the movie Contact, where Jodie Foster, when she was young, she would just listen to in that movie she played the scientist, and she would just listen to the white noise on the TV. She talked about it, how she thought and felt that there was something there, but just beyond our grasp of understanding.
Yep. I think that's going to become I think personally for me, now I hear things like Neuralinks coming out. I'm now reading about other companies that are experimenting in and around these kind of ideas, right? Putting something in the brain. When you connect the subconscious and consciousness together and you're communicating with just like a sense of knowing.
Right.
I think we're going to bridge the gap between what we perceive as real and what we perceive as mystery. I think the gap will be bridged because you'll have
I think you're right about that. The more evolved we become consciously and connecting to the subconscious, the essence aspect of us, the less paranormal and the less alien anything will be, I believe.
Agreed. Especially when if you start communicating that way, right? We have Neuralink and we're communicating with a knowing. Once you're communicating with other human beings with just a knowing, no words, we're going to start seeing how silly race was. And how silly nation and religion. We're going to see how silly that was.
And I talk about that too, even in my book, like a type 2 civilization that Michio Kaku would talk about, and the astrophysicists from Russia in the early 60s talked about. Once we have that ability to communicate like that, what we do, in my opinion, is we start eliminating a lot of the lying that goes on. And I think because of lies and deceit, I think that gets us to where we're put into position to where we're fighting with each other constantly, because you don't know what to believe or what not to believe. But if you have something that's more real, that's more feeling and can understand the ideas that are being thought projected, I think you eliminate some of the ability to lie, the deception.
Yeah. And above all, so you get to the point where you're communicating with a knowing. You things like race slip away.
Yes.
Then you start having an understanding of what currency is. Like, why do we need money? If you think about what currency is, it's a funny thing to me, by the way. I look at this, I laugh whenever I think about money, right? We need money. We need trade. But where did it come from? What gives it its value? And 9 out of 10 people will say,
Adam.
yeah, they're going to say gold. Well, why is gold so valuable?
What was so, I've talked about that before. What does gold really do? I mean, I think it may stem back to quote unquote the extraterrestrials or interdimensionals and or combination thereof, several races, and maybe gold. I mean, what is its most prominent uses? I mean, from what I understand, it reflects radiation. It can protect biology. It's a great electrical conduit. But what value was that to people of thousands of years ago, even to many people today?
I could answer that. Well, in my own theory anyway, rewind time to the first guy that found a piece of gold, right? And he's walking around, look at it. It's shimmering. It's the most beautiful rock he's ever seen, right? And the only way he could explain this is that it came from some deity from somewhere, gave him this gift. We're talking about primitive man. Now you got a guy who is, he's a farmer. He makes grain and food for people. And he sees this rock and he's like, wow, man, that's beautiful. What is that? He goes, the gods gave it to me. They're like, he gave it to you. He goes, I want some of that. He goes, I'll tell you what, give me some of your food and I'll give you a piece of this rock that the gods gave me. Meanwhile, he's telling people that the gods
first
gave
entrepreneur there, eh?
Yeah. So he's telling the people that gods gave him this shiny piece of metal. And so he's the chosen one in their eyes. And then so all the people, he collects more of this shiny stuff. And so then you have barter and trade starting, right? So the idea of gold thousands of years ago being valuable, again, about conductive it is, what is good for radiation. At the end of the day, it's just really pretty. And the gods gave it to us. And we could trade it. So you could have some of this godlike material for some of your hard-earned stuff you made. While I sit up here and tell people. And so people would worship this guy. He's obviously connected to the gods. No doubt. He has shiny stuff. So whenever they find shiny stuff, he's the only one worthy. And that's how money traveled up then, in my opinion.
Well, that sounds feasible for part of it. The only thing I would interject, and this is just my own humble opinion, is I think somebody from elsewhere put a value on it. And perhaps we were helped to use our particular species or very similar at the time to mine it or to look for it and to gather it so they could use it for space exploration, reflection of radiation, conduit for electricity, etc. And then we used it, like you just said, afterwards.
Right. So what ends up may be is that if we're an advanced life form and we're using this gold as, I don't know, something to power our ship, and then we give a piece of it to this guy, well, then again, it's another representation. The gods gave me this, and I'm important, and I will give you some for your food or for your wine or whatever it is. And then somehow, thousands of years later, it's still the same value. Gold's being stockpiled. Now, tomorrow, if we go to a post-apocalyptic scenario, it's worthless. You know what's valuable is ammunition, food, and water. And the people who have that in abundance are the new kings.
Right, and oxygen, of course.
Yeah, because so if you go to some guy who has food and ammunition, like, hey, I'll give you some of this gold for your ammo and your food, he's like, well, what am I going to do with that? I can't eat it.
So there has to be a type of status quo maintained for gold to be, put, at the value that it is.
It's I find it strange. Like, so it's that point where circle back to when we're all linked up and there's a knowing. Things like material items won't matter. Things like race won't matter. Your entertainment, will it be really all entertainment when you're in a state of just knowing? Because as it is today, the average human being today can only be entertained for 30 seconds at best. Right.
It's a great point, Adam. You're right. I mean, if we get to this level of consciousness and the recognition and the bigger picture and understanding, in my opinion, it'll just be on that infinity loop where we'll have to do other things for entertainment. Not quite as dummied down as it is now, but not meaning good or bad. That's just where we are right now in the larger scope of things.
Right.
But as we evolve, what is entertainment today would have been science fiction 100 years ago.
Right.
100 years ago, what was entertainment would be too much work today for us.
Agreed. And, unfortunately, when you're in a state of just knowing the way we're speaking about, right, it's not good enough to be entertained for 30 seconds. Now you just want to know more. It's that, which is when our species decides interstellar is the only way, because this isn't good enough here anymore. We got to learn more. We got to expand, which is what I think our observers are doing with us. Yes. And when we get to that point where we're communicating with that at that level we're discussing, I think when it's observing us, it's like, all right, I think they're ready. I think they're ready to talk to us. I think it's time, because again, when you're linked up, no race, no religion, no politics, no hatred, just a knowing. And you get to that point. Yeah. I mean, there's the only thing preventing us from having communication with that point is that we are still a violent species.
Yeah, we are. And that mode can be kept under control, so to speak. Right. It can be, unfortunately, exploited. And like I said, I have a dear friend that's looking into that type of idea now with the race and the labels and all that type of stuff. And we have to get past that. And when we do, we're going to be at another level of consciousness. And then I got to go back to that saying that I think I said in the last show that I was on, Jacques Vallée, who was involved with the remote viewing, obviously the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The French astrophysicist was, portrayed in that, being Jacques Vallée. And he says, I propose to describe consciousness as a process of, traversing through time and space, which become a side effect of consciousness once you understand it as a bigger picture.
Agreed. I'm glad you said that. I really wish now more than ever that people would start realizing, what the value of us as people, as a species, and whatnot. Not even the value of the planet. Right? Because let's be honest. Earth, at the moment we start doing things to make it so uninhabitable, it's going to fight back. We're going to lose, period. Because you could say, well, you're admitting all this into the atmosphere and you're killing us. Well, no, this is Earth's reaction to what we're admitting. It's now going to it's going to reverse it. It's going to heal itself, even if it means making it uninhabitable for us. So I'm glad you bring that point. And I hope.
Let me just do just to that Jacques Vallée, because I had to look it up real quick. I'm sorry, Adam. I want to get it right because it's his words. I propose to describe consciousness as the process of informational associations that are retrieved and traversed. The illusion of time and space are merely a side effect of consciousness as it traverses the associations.
Yeah, I like that. You're gonna have to send me a link for that. I'm gonna put that. I'm gonna have that painted put on the wall, so I can see that. I'm one of those, I like looking at things. I handwrite stuff, right? It's in my face.
That's good.
There's people out that I spoke to, like Cheryl Costa, Dr. Wilbur Allen. These are people I speak to, and like I watch these shows, and there's a lot of people who get on these shows again, time and time and again. Some of them, I'm not going to say names, but some people are riding coattails, right? They're the relativist person, and because I'm the foremost expert, but there's like Cheryl Costa. And Dr. Wilbur Allen, where these people have compiled so much data. It's insanity. Cheryl Costa has compiled enough data that if I were to start reading it, going through it now, I would be in my 90s by the time I completed.
That's funny.
Yeah. Dr. Wilbur Allen, this guy, another one, he's compiling, not only is he compiling data, but he's coming with ideas on how to be able to perceive our guests. Or I should say our observers. Like he really wants to, with the right, if that guy had the right funding behind him, I think he would create amazing stuff,
I have no doubt. Yeah, it sounds like it. I think there's several people like that. Yes.
Yeah, like David Marler. This guy's got a library of stuff. He compiled a lot of data. And, I keep hearing naysayers when it comes to these people. It's data. You can't condemn a person over data. They're not telling you they're not forming their opinions. They're sharing data they compiled.
What you have to remember, Adam, is that the naysayers, it could come from, a variety of different angles. One, it could just be fear. People don't want to change, and they don't want to change the way they feel they're comfortable. And even if it is not the most comfortable life, it's still more of a security blanket than being something that's unknown that would make them even more uncomfortable.
Right.
And then you have to remember there's people that are put out into different areas that basically it's their job to disseminate mis and disinformation. And part of that is being a naysayer. That's gone on all along. Somebody once told me, a very wise person said, there's no need for dis and misinformation unless there is actual information.
Right. I agree. Yeah. Because it's a fear thing, right? Because people are not willing to accept things they don't understand. And that makes up a large majority of humanity. Like, I said this on a few podcasts. Like, if aliens landed tomorrow, like people say on the White House lawn, people would still be like, well, that's a devil. That is definitely Satan. Because
they have to put it in a guise that they can somewhat understand, right, or at least that has been imprinted upon them. And eventually they have to learn that, it's not just God and the earth, that, earth is just one planet. It's a speck of sand on an endless beach. There's billions and billions of stars out there, as Carl Sagan used to say. It's the odds, and just mathematics. You talk about mathematics and data. The odds are so overwhelmingly in favor of other intelligent life, and that the numbers, obviously, once crunched, come out into the millions and millions of civilizations potentially. And even some of those are going to be time travelers and spacefaring in terms of galaxies and wormholes and stargates and black holes and all those different types of things. It's just, as I've always said, think about this and ponder it in the audience. I've probably said it before, and obviously, Adam, you've heard me say it. If we are ever going to learn how to time travel, or ever did in the past, or any civilization out there is ever going to learn how to time travel, whether they did in the past, 1,000 years from now, 1,000,000 years from now, that means it's going on right now.
Right. Yeah. And, how many civilizations they're gone already? They've had
many, probably
millions of years of existence to fade out one day. I think our observers, the ones that are watching us, they're one of probably many that were lucky enough to travel interstellarly. And as far as time travel goes, whenever they left their planet, like that movie Interstellar, they left their planet and went through whatever it means they had to travel, whether it be a wormhole or otherwise, their ancestors are long gone. Like their species, wherever they came from, gone completely. There's nowhere to go back to. Their job's just to travel and take information, learn, spread seeds. I firmly believe in the near future with the James Webb Telescope, and once we found a Earth-like planet, if I read this correctly, it would take 60 years for us to travel to, right? 60 years, which is, one lifetime, which is not impractical for us in terms.
In current standards right now.
Yeah, current standards, yeah.
Of technology, yeah.
I think we're going to find planets with primitive life on it, perhaps in their Stone Age, or in their Bronze Age. We're going to find Rome playing out again someplace,
Right. Color me crazy, Adam. I think it's been going on for a long time already, from our distant past to our distant future. I think some groups, they'll have to do the interstellar type of route, like you said. I think others are even more advanced and can go back and forth in their own times. They're creating timelines. I just think it's so complex, and I think maybe our particular dimension of existence, it's still more of a physical, like you just said, interstellar, but I think there's other races that evolved so much that they could be right here, right next to us now, and nobody would even know it, and not even the aliens that we call, that are kind of like our cousins per se, that have 2 arms, 2 legs, that had that type of thing, and they have the drones working for them. They wouldn't even know it. But right. That's just me.
Yeah, there's definitely there's got to be different layers, right? To put this in your mind, Tony, if you got a grain of sand and you get a piece of metal and break it down, does it disappear? No, it's going to break down to the point where we can no longer perceive it, but it's still there.
Right. And even small. If it's small enough, exactly, like we know roughly 118 elements and 109 properties, et cetera, on the periodic chart. There is no such thing as energy going away. It's all energy. It's right. Like the first law of thermodynamics. Energy never ceases to exist. It just changes form.
Right. And then now with that same idea in mind, look at I'm just now starting to read more about the bubble of our universe, right? We're not figuring out. We're guessing that there's some sort of limit we get to, because we're saying we're only able to perceive 13 something billion years to see the very edge of the universe. And then there's another theory I read about where we're one bubble of many universes. So
absolutely.
For all
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So there's another Earth and another solar Milky Way in another universe that's parallel to ours. And what
There may be more than one.
now can we travel to it? It could probably be easier than you think because it's energy doesn't travel the same way as something physical. So this is what
Good
leads me to
point.
think that when we depart from here, energy transfers to someplace else. You either get recycled or you move forward.
That's why I think when we have the quote unquote experiences of astral travel or etheric travel, out of body experiences, and I've studied that pretty extensively, like I talked about on your show before, through the Monroe Institute, et cetera, even remote viewing to an extent has that type of thing. And that's where that Jacques Vallée quote comes in, again, I mean, that essence of us, again, I propose to describe consciousness as the process of informational associations that are retrieved and traversed. The illusion of time and space are merely a side effect of consciousness as it traverses the associations.
Yep.
That innate aspect of us may be of this source energy, which is just playing itself out in that infinity loop numerous times over, but it needs to have comparisons. It needs to have measurements. It needs to have up, down, yin, yang for anything to really be anything. And I think that's what we're all connected to. And I think our great masters from the past and others that have come here from star systems, et cetera, have explained some of this to us as well.
Yeah. It's a good way to put it. We need balance. There must be balance in every single thing. There must be balance.
Absolutely.
You can't have too much of anything. I've had people, extensions of my family, right? People that are, look, I have a lot of relatives that are, they're Christian. I grew up in a Catholic setting. My current state of belief is this. I think we just have an architect. I think there's a greater energy out there that we say God because it's just the best way we could describe it, right? We came up with our own word to describe a greater energy.
Right.
So I've had relatives that, they pray. Like, I don't think anything's wrong with prayer. I think prayer is a good thing.
Not at all. It's focused effort, and
Right.
you're really putting and applying yourself, your inner self, etc., your being.
And so that being said, I think religion's good across the map. I think it serves a good purpose, has a good message until, again, where you have a really charismatic, self-serving person at the helm. That's a problem, right?
Right.
Because then he's doing things in it for himself and misquoting religious jargon to see fit what he wants.
Right.
So
you're right, Adam. Yep. Let's just put it this way. It's been tweaked time and time again, no doubt,
Yeah.
to benefit, a small group, and probably somewhere down the line, the whole idea of extraterrestrials as well were exploited in the name of that as well. So.
Sure. I mean, I've had people say like, oh, I prayed and it never comes to fruition. Like, here's my thought. Let's use the word God. Let's say God's real. I'm going to put this in a parallel with humans. Let's say we have an ant farm. We love our ants. We're going to feed them and take care of them. We hope they do well. It's an enormous ant farm. But if one of them, gets injured in an accident and it's crippled, do we notice? No. It's impossible for us to look through our millions of ants on our ant farm and notice one that's crippled or one that's been killed. It's near impossible to know all that. So what I'm saying by that is not that God doesn't care, and you got to be forgiving to whatever you call your God, but it's just he cares about your species and the overall outcome of your species. You as an individual, on the other hand, I don't know. It's impossible look at the ant farm. It's nearly impossible to identify the individual. It's
Right.
crazy to think that.
Right. Well, that's definitely a way to look at it, and it's interesting. But the ant itself might have an energy underlying its own existence that might be more connected at a higher level or frequency to this quote unquote God.
Now that's another point. So then you have the one that stands out. Now you're looking at your ant farm, right? You're observing, you're admiring the beauty of it, and you're feeding them because you care about the overall ants. But there's always the few.
Like a work of art.
Right. There's always a few to travel to the top and are doing something so significant that it catches your notice. You're seeing this ant. It's a special ant. It's conveying a message for the entirety of the group. It just means that ant has a different perception, and so a greater energy can now perceive it. It's
right.
And I've always think of that in terms of like, well, because for me, myself, Tony, I've spent my life, I had some hardships. I was like, why doesn't God hear me? This is back when I was, thinking that way. And that's when the reality set in. Like, well, I'm one of so many. And the impact I'm going to have on society may not be as profound as per se the person that's sitting at the helm that's doing it a good job. And it's standing out. It's that ant standing out. And it's conveying the message for all of us. Unfortunately, in this day and age, Too many people climb to the top, and it's all self-serving, and it's not playing out.
Adam, I mean, you might have that as big of an impact. I mean, like you just said about those ants, a couple of them that come up and they're the ones that become the visionaries that open the minds of many others. Your show opens the minds of many others, beginning with yourself, and it's fueled you to be more passionate with studying and with getting certain guests on and allowing them to share. So with that said, it's not just you that the show is about, but it's also your guests. Right. It's also the opportunity you give them and that they share to you. And then you grow as a person and become even more aware and even more conscious because of the information that's being exchanged. They're helping you wake up just like you're helping them wake up, your guests, and they're helping your listeners wake up, who may be also helping you and your guests wake up. It's an inter-exchange of energy. It's a complement to each other to increase consciousness and awareness. And there's that group consciousness that you were talking about earlier. So you're doing a great service to the people. That's why I admire your inspiration and the shows that you can do one after another. And you just keep doing at the pace you feel comfortable with. And I'm glad and feel honored to be able to interview you, and so you could tell your listeners your story and your inspirations and where you were coming from.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I firmly believe in this. I think even you or anyone, I mean, when it says to get to that point of importance, the Dude of Podcast required me to step forward and start it. All right, it's got to start somewhere. I can't just sit here and hope. Got to make it, because it could be that something you said or I said or someone else on the show said, one little thing that put an inspiration into the mind of just one other person.
Yes.
And that other person then turns around and writes a book about humanity, then which influences many. And then
or it just helps them solve another problem they may have in school or in science, or it inspires them. I mean, it's a domino effect. It's the old 100th monkey theory. You know, what one happens in one area, it triggers an effect in another area and in another area. Our informational network now is beyond anything we could have comprehended, 50 years ago. And the information that we're giving, yes, a lot of it is put out and disinformation, etc. But the information that is there, our innate selves will sift through it. And in time, we will evolve our consciousness. Hopefully, knock on wood, that we don't self-destruct, prior to that. But as we are evolving, we will become spacefaring, and we will share like we are with each other here. We will hopefully go out into the quote unquote heavens and work with other groups from a galactic community standpoint and start doing our own projects and our own ant farms, perhaps.
Right. And it's got to begin there. Like Denzel Washington, actor. I love that guy, man. I love him. He's a great actor.
Oh, yeah.
But he has said things over the course of time, these little quotes. One, like, if you fall down, get up. If you fall down again, get up again. It's like things he says like that. When you lose faith in people, you're like, what's wrong with these people? And it's something he said in an interview. He's like, it starts at home. It starts at home. And what that means is not just your children, but anyone in your circumference that, you speak to regularly. If you put positive into someone, you're going to get positive out of them. That's the goal. All right. You would hope, but you got to constantly put the positive out. You can't. If you get to the point where you're naysaying or speaking negatively about people regularly, you got to check yourself. Something's going on.
One thing we have to do, I think, Adam, as a whole, and a lot of people, and I know I had this, that it was a little bit of a dilemma with myself years past when I was getting involved with a lot of this stuff. We can't be so hard on ourselves either. We have to understand we are connected to something that's much greater, that energy, etc., what I'd like to call source or God. And it goes for all of us, myself, you, your listeners, anybody who hears this. It's okay to fall down once in a while, like you said with the Denzel Washington quote, but to just get back up, get back on the horse and keep riding. Right. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We're moving forward as a collective, and we are gaining more greater consciousness and awareness every day. Even though there's trials and tribulations, what doesn't kill us will make us stronger.
Agreed. And so before we close, my final thing, law enforcement that you asked about.
Yes, please.
I'll tell you what got me on the bandwagon of supporting law enforcement. Now, I'm not saying every cop's a good person. There's a bad person in every profession. All right. There was nurses that were serial killers, nurses. There have been evil teachers. I mean, there's the horror stories extend to everything you could look at. But in law enforcement, now take our society currently and then remove cops completely. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to be horrendous. Opportunists are at everywhere you look's an opportunist.
Right.
There's always that guy like, how do I get over on these people? Like,
yeah, it's the old saying, you don't know what you have until it's gone.
Right. So before even the podcast, I was hearing like defund the police. I'm like, what are you, crazy? You increase funds. When I say increase funds means, have a better screening program, have a psychological evaluation, have them better trained at like say jiu-jitsu where they can hold people and it's not going to cost someone a life. A wrist lock, a certain jiu-jitsu moves, you can incapacitate someone without having to harm them mortally. So that being said, there's great cops out there. I had Lenny DePaul on the show. He's a shining star of a police officer, a law enforcement person. I've had Cloyd Steiger on. He's coming on again. I communicate with Brett Preston. He's a cop here in Florida. He's got a team of 6. I mean, these are good people,
Right.
and it's shameful that people they're going to, it upsets me. Look,
What's that label you talked about earlier?
yeah. And so if you're having a problem with a cop, and I've had problems with cops in my past, I was a punk as a kid. I'm going to be honest. I was a little punk, right? And especially my adolescence. You don't appreciate law enforcement until you start evaluating why they're there to begin with, right? It's in this, you need them. So that being said, if you get into a situation with a police officer and you feel like it's negative, sure, record yourself. You have to protect yourself. I agree with it, but don't go walking around public places with a camera trying to get some likes on YouTube. And you're saying you're an auditor. That's you're inciting a problem. You're antagonizing. It's unprofessional. You're going in that building to find conflict. Now, I'm not saying everyone in that building is probably they need to be educated more, and probably this movement caused some people in government to be more educated. But don't be an antagonist, because what's going to happen is you're that guy. I'm auditing this. I'm auditing that. One day you're going to get the law enforcement actually get them defunded, and then the opportunities are going to come knocking on your door. And who are you going to call?
That person.
Yeah, who are you going to call? You're not calling John down the road.
Exactly.
Because John down the road's a dentist, and he's not coming to help you.
Right. No, well said, Adam. Well said. I think you're right, and I think sometimes people try to put too much on a particular situation. It's just like anything else. I mean, people can idolize football players. They can idolize basketball players. They can idolize, Olympic athletes. But everybody, in each area, there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 that's going to fall or going to make a mistake or going to take that step back. That's part of that forgiving. But
Right.
with said, they all have to be conscious and aware as well as to what they're doing. But just because one is doing it doesn't mean it's a reflection on all.
Right. Agreed. Because there's legit, there are great people out there. I mean, in the world of law enforcement alone, try to imagine in your mind now that you're condemning people that legitimately walk into deal with situations you would never consider dealing with. Too dangerous, or I don't want nothing to do with that, or, you're asking these people to go deal with that shit. How many cops have gotten shot? This happened recently here in Florida. A state trooper was shot and killed he pulled someone over, right? For people that moan and complain about, oh, they're pulling me over. Ted Bundy was caught because of a traffic violation. All right. So,
right.
And this guy has broken out of prison. He has countless killed people. I mean, it's a pure psychopath and a traffic violation. So the next time you're moaning about a cop pulled you over, bear that in mind. Because the next time they just say, oh, I don't want to deal with the problem, they let this guy go. It just might be another serial killer coming to your town. These are things you have to consider. So that being said,
right. Excellent. I respect your respect for the law enforcement, and it's shared here. Thank you much for voicing that. And I think people needed to hear that.
Agreed. Well, Tony, this was fun. It was different.
Agreed, Adam.
I liked being on this side for a little bit. I do have a lot of energy. I will speak forever. And those that are listening, I am wrong often about things. I make a lot of mistakes, but criticism's good. I've taken criticism, and I've even thanked people for it because it helps me see myself from a perspective I can't see myself at. So, but that being said, Tony, I enjoyed this thoroughly, man.
Adam, thank you for letting me host 3PNR today. and you were a great guest, and I appreciate you coming forward and letting me do this. And once again, and hopefully in the future, we'll connect again and give something more that hopefully your listeners can take and grow upon.
Indeed. I'm going to talk to Tony Post. Good night, everyone.
Good night.